YouTube, it's Mr. Magz here, and today on Stupid Nintendo Articles, I'm going over an article titled A Nintendo Switch Virtual Console Isn't Needed. Now, there are multiple reasons why that just isn't true, and I'll go over them as I read the article. So let's continue. Many have pondered why the Nintendo Switch lacks a virtual console like its predecessors, the Wii and the Wii U and 3DS. There was such an excellent collection of classic games you could buy from previous consoles like the NES and SNES and N64. There were even select Wii games that were available on the Wii U for purchase. The Nintendo Switch lacks this feature entirely. In fact, the UI for the Switch feels incredibly rudimentary, although that's not a knock on the system itself. It's user friendly. It hey, it is user friendly and easy to navigate. Still, the lack of a virtual console is a huge concern for many Switch owners. What many don't realize is that as of this moment, the Nintendo Switch Virtual Console isn't needed. It may come in time, but not any time in the near future. So you're saying just because you don't feel the Virtual Console was necessary, you're just going to say it's not going to come anytime soon. It would have been better for you to say, I don't think it's coming in the near future, or it doesn't need to come anytime soon. Just saying it is not coming in the near future, you have no idea. In 2 months, this article could be irrelevant because Nintendo could have a Nintendo Direct or something and announce a virtual console is happening. They recently announced that Nintendo Switch Online is being officially, a payable is going to be officially a payable service in September. So Virtual Console in some form or fashion will be a thing by September, which I would assume would be considered the near future. I would assume the near future would be within the calendar year. So yeah, I already this article seems a bit irrelevant, but whatever. Nindies. Nindies, or independent games, available on the Nintendo Switch eShop, are a core part of the identity of the Nintendo Switch. The Switch has the best collection of independent games compared to any other console, and they sell very well. Their Nindies brand is incredibly strong. This summer, Nintendo even had a Nindies showcase in the style of their Nintendo Directs. I think it would have been better for you to say this past summer, because this summer implies the upcoming one. But again, that's semantics. There's other things to nitpick here. Uh, yes, yes, indeed. The indie games that are on the Switch are selling extremely well. Axiom Verge, the developers recently came out and said that January sale for Axiom Verge are the highest January since the game came out. And also Super Meat Boy, it sold pretty much the same amount that it sold on the 360 on its launch day, which had way higher. There were way more 360s in circulation at the time than Switches. So that's impressive. There are also many other games that are selling double or even triple what they sold on other systems or on the PC alone, or even all of them combined. I think SteamWorld Dig 2 or the Shovel Knight, one of them two or both, sold more on the Nintendo Switch than every other system combined. So, yes, the independent games do seem to have a very, very strong place on the system. I will give you that. A virtual console with all the retro games everyone wants to repurchase for the fourth or fifth time would take away from the sales of independent games. Indies are a cornerstone of the Nintendo Switch. Independent developers love the system and their games sell very well on the platform. In fact, they are selling better on the Switch than any other platform, like I just said. There is precedent for the virtual console and indie games coexisting. On the 3DS, indie games still sold extremely well, yet 3DS also had a virtual console of sorts. I know at least the new 3DS you could play in SNES games, and the regular 3DS had Game Boy, I think Game Boy Color and NES games on its virtual console, and they coexisted fairly well. I don't really necessarily see a reason why having A Link to the Past or Mario Bros. Um, or Super Mario World or any of these retro games, I don't really understand how that would necessarily eat a lot of the indie sales. I almost guarantee, I don't know this for a fact, but I almost guarantee the majority of people who had to pick who would have to pick between the newest indie release for $10 or A Link to the Past for the fourth or fifth time will more than likely pick the new game because it's new to them. Unless they got some crazy discount or they just wanted to play A Link to the Past again for the fourth or fifth time, which I don't really see many people wanting to play a game again as opposed to being interested in wanting to play a brand new game. I could be wrong about that, but that just kind of makes sense to me personally. Nintendo spotlights their games quite frequently. A virtual console at this point would merely detract from this, and independent developers would suffer for it. Celeste just released on the Nintendo eShop and is garnering incredible reviews. IGN gave it a perfect score. Although, yes, it is being released on other platforms as well, it's currently the top selling game on Nintendo eShop. The game cannot the same cannot be said for other platforms. It's outselling the likes of Zelda and Mario Kart in terms of digital sales. That is extraordinary. Um okay. So that's kind of skewed a bit considering Zelda and Mario Kart have been out for over 8 months, and Mario Kart and Mario Odyssey has been out for like 3 months. So yeah, it makes perfect sense for a game like Celeste, a new game like Celeste, to be at the top for a week or two. Pretty much every indie game that comes out, um, that has come out since late November, has just shot up to the charts. Now, is Mario an amazing game and should have sold a lot? Yeah, I completely agree with that. But the majority of people who are going to buy Mario Odyssey have already bought it physically, or if they got it digitally, then the majority of people, there's not as many people who are willing to buy Mario anymore than people who are buying, than who would buy Celeste. So it just kind of makes sense for a new indie game to be at the top of the charts for a week or two. And yeah, I guess that's it for the indie argument. Like I said, I don't really feel like there would be a virtual console would impact sales of indies that much, especially when Nintendo does quarterly ish Nindies showcases. So all the brand new indie games are going to be showcased in Nintendo Directs and Indie Focus Directs. So they will get their exposure. They will show up in top selling release in like top selling and recent releases on Nintendo eShop. And there is a very high possibility that Virtual Console could be its own little category. So so those new releases don't interfere with new indie releases. So you would have to go to the Virtual Console tab of the eShop in order to see all the new Virtual Console games. Could that be a bit cumbersome? Yeah, but I feel like that just kind of makes sense if Nintendo actually is a bit worried about eShop or Virtual Console games taking away from Nindy games. So I just don't really see it as a problem. I kind of feel like you're just kind of looking for problems here. Now, if the if they don't section off the eShop like that, then could it be a problem? Yes, especially if Nintendo does just put everything, every single virtual console game out there at launch, just and and if they release them in bulk around the same time as another indie game, then yeah, that indie game easily could get drowned. But I kind of feel like Nintendo realizes how strong of indie support they have. So they're gonna want to plan around that. At least that's what I would do, and that's what I think they're gonna do. NES and SNES Classic. This right here is honestly the reason why I chose this article. This section alone just makes no sense. So the NES and SNES Classic have been enormous hits for Nintendo. The SNES Classic contains 21 of the system's greatest games of all time, and the NES Classic has 30 classic games from the console that changed gaming forever. Nintendo revealed at their quarterly briefing that the SNES Classic has sold 4 million units so far, although no date is given for when that sell-through rate date is. Probably December 1st or 31st. That's almost double what the SNES Classic sold. However, the SNES Classic was always super hard to find. I never saw one in stores. None of the GameStops I go to, none of the Walmarts or Targets, I literally never saw one. And SNES Classics, I still haven't ever seen one, but I at least see pictures of them existing in stores, which I never even saw that of the SNES or of the NES Classic. So again, that's not. I just kind of feel like that's just kind of skewing it a little bit in your favor. You're trying to say that the SNES sold so much better than the NES Classic, therefore they don't need Virtual Console. Um, when the NES easily could have sold that much if it were readily available. Let's assume the sell-through rate date is, in fact, December 31st, like the switches in the report. The system launched on September 29th. That means the system moved about 1.3 million units a month. The Nintendo Switch has been out since March and has sold almost 15 million units through December 31st. It launched in March 2017. The Switch sold roughly 1.6 million units per month. That means the Nintendo sold 19 million home consoles this year. Impressive. Okay. So is the NES and SNES Classic and potential future classic lines, are those lucrative for Nintendo? Yes. It is impressive that they sold over 4 million SNES Classics in just 4 or 5 months. That is definitely impressive. Maybe 3, whatever. But there's one thing this guy just isn't taking into account. The SNES Classic contains 21 SNES games. The NES contains 30 NES games. There are many games that people would have wanted on those systems that they just didn't get. Chrono Trigger, I'm not even sure if they could get that on the Virtual Console, but it's still an option. The other two Donkey Kong games, which again, I'm not sure if they have the rights to. I think they can release those. I know there are others. I can't think of any big ones right now, but I know for a fact there are other NES and SNES games that are not a part of that 21 or 30 respectively that Nintendo could release on the Virtual Console that these people can't get anywhere else outside of the Virtual Console. And also, this guy is just completely forgetting about the fact that the Switch is a handheld also. So yes, you can play Earthbound or or Mario Bros or Link to the Past or any other game like that on your SNES Classic or your NES Classic, but you can't take those games on the go. You can't take these 60-hour RPGs that are on the SNES Classic with you. I know that many people would love to take Secret of Mana or Final Fantasy VI with them wherever they go. That's something I don't really think that's anything they've been able to do before outside of the Final Fantasy VI port to the Game Boy Advance, I think. So they haven't been able to do it for about 10 plus years or 15. Yeah, 15 plus years. Sure, people would love to do that again. That's something this guy just never takes into account at any point in this article. The point of this is that the Super Nintendo Classic sold at lightning fast pace with limited supply. It was also much more difficult to find than Nintendo Switch. I was lucky to be able to find two, one for myself and one for my parents for Christmas. If Nintendo was selling a retro game console with classic software, why should they be putting these older games on Nintendo Switch when these consoles have sold so incredibly well? Um, like I just said, the option to be able to play it on the go. It, does that just not make sense to you? And also the fact that there are games that could easily be on the virtual console that aren't on these classic systems. And what about there are other games from other systems that could easily be on virtual console. Like the Wii virtual console I think had Genesis games or something like that. So they could easily have games from other systems that aren't even Nintendo on a virtual console. And if we're just talking Nintendo virtual consoles, N64 and especially GameCube games are something people are really wanting to play on this system. So there definitely is a reason to have these games on the Nintendo Switch. Being forced to play them on the TV alone when people have the Switch and they would love to take this game from the SNES and just plop it, take it with you on the Switch. I almost guarantee that a lot of people who have all these games on the SNES Classic and NES Classic, I mean, a significant amount of these people would buy these games again on the Switch. And what about the people that can't get the SNES Classic or the NES Classic? What if they want to play A Link to the Past for the nth time, or Mario Bros, or Balloon Fight, or whatever? Any of these games, what if they can't get the classic system? They would have to get. It would be very convenient for them to just be able to get it on the Switch. Like I said, I've still never been able to find an SNES or NES Classic in a store anywhere near me. Wherever I go, I can't find one. So it would be super convenient if I ever were in the mood to play a super retro game. I could just boot up my Switch, download it, and take it anywhere I want. Options are never a bad thing. Straight from Nintendo's quarterly earnings report. During fall of last year, we brought back the nostalgic Super Nintendo Entertainment System as a palm-sized home console. Super Nintendo Entertainment System Super NES Classic Edition has reached 4 million units in global sell-through. Wow. Okay, I never realized it's called Super Nintendo Entertainment System Super NES Classic Edition. That's uh that's a mouthful and super unnecessary. Super NES Classic Edition made that not enough. People get it, but whatever. We have announced that we will resume production for the NES Classic Edition this year. We plan to continue selling NES Classic Edition and Super NES Classic Edition this year. Wow. Take a drink every time the word classic is mentioned in this article. We view them as an opportunity to garner interest in Nintendo Switch from those who have not interacted with video games in a long time or ever. Yeah, they're purely nostalgia bait. You know, parents who maybe grew up with the NES or SNES, might see an SNES or NES Classic on the store and say, "Hey, I remember that thing. Maybe I should buy that for me or my kids or whatever." And then they can play them just like that. Or these same people could buy a Switch for their kids or buy a Switch for themselves and go to the virtual console tab and see, "Oh, I haven't played A Link to the Past in a while. I want to play that again." Same thing. There is literally no the reason NES Classic and SNES Classic existing and any future classic systems existing is not a good enough reason to just not have the virtual console on the Switch. That is money Nintendo will be leaving on the table that they could easily have. So just saying, "Oh, you can get all these games on this system that people are already having trouble getting," that just doesn't make sense. A virtual console makes no sense. The SNES Classic is selling phenomenally, and the NES Classic sold incredibly well until it was discontinued last year, and now these consoles are two of the cornerstones of Nintendo's overall strategy. Putting a virtual console on a Nintendo Switch would only cut into the sales of the NES and SNES Classic, as well as indie games. Is it potentially true that it would cut into the NES and SNES Classic? Maybe, but at the same time, the NES and SNES Classic, they're more than just a device to play games on. They're literally nostalgia bait. They're for people who see them in stores and impulse buy them for $60 or $80 respectively, just so they can have something that looks like the SNES or NES Classic, or yeah, like the SNES or NES, just in their house again. They might not necessarily play all the games, but it would still be nice for these people just to have it on their shelves or whatever. And like I said, there are people who would love to play these games on the go, but because the SNES and NES Classic are not portable, they can't do that. I could understand a point being made for you saying, "Oh, if they had a Game Boy Classic, and then there being Game Boy Virtual Console games," I could understand to an extent an argument like that. But still, it would be super nice to have all these classic games on one system. They would be contradicting the very brand they have tried so hard to build and damage the relationship they have developed with independent developers. Like I said before, I really don't feel like the virtual console would be that detrimental to independent developers. I just don't really feel like there's as much overlap as this guy is really trying to make it out to be. With the resumption of the NES Classic production and the dedication to continue to sell the NES Classic, there's no reason for a dedicated virtual console on the Nintendo Switch from a business perspective, outside of money from people who don't have a classic system, or people who want to play these games on the go, or people who want certain games that aren't on these classic systems that you can have on the virtual console, so people can play all the games they want in any way they want. There's clearly a market for this thing. They can make a lot more money selling the SNES and NES classics than putting these games on the eShop, cutting into indie game sales and the sales of the SNES and NES classic. Um, if I'm not mistaken, they would actually make a lot more money per game selling the same games on the virtual console, because on the SNES they're selling each it's 21 games for $80. That's about $4 per game. On the NES, they're selling 30 games for 60. That's $2 per game. And if the Wii U is any indication, they would sell any virtual console games for at least $5. So they would be making more money on the sale of A Link to the Past by selling on the virtual console if it is around $5, as opposed to the technically the $4 that they bought, that the same people who bought an SNES Classic paid for it. So per game, it actually would be more money to sell, or actually would be, um, yeah, it would you would get more money by selling these games on the virtual console than you would by just people buying the SNES Classic. And again, there very easily could be some overlap between people who buy Link to the Past on the SNES Classic and Virtual Console. So there's really no reason to not have it. In fact, this may be Nintendo's strategy moving forward. We very well may see an NES, an N64 Classic next year. Can I please get some Wave Race and Cruisin' USA? Could we very easily get an N64 Classic? Probably, but at the same time, I'm not really sure if that's the best idea, especially considering the majority of the great games that came out on the N64 were rare titles. And I'm not really sure how friendly Nintendo and Microsoft are, if Microsoft would allow Banjo Kazooie and Conquer and GoldenEye to be on the N64 Classic, but it wouldn't necessarily be a bad decision to put and have an N64 Classic out there, especially if they change the controller. Which, again, if you want to, maybe if they want to keep the classicness of the N64 Classic, they wouldn't change it. But in order to just make the N64 actually playable, it might actually be a good thing to make the N64 controller more ergonomic. But yeah, I don't know. But even if the N64 Classic does come out, it would still make perfect sense for them to release Mario 64 on the N64 Classic and Virtual Console, so people can pay $7 for it on Virtual Console and take it anywhere they want. It just makes sense. Or even something like Smash Bros. You could easily have the original Smash 64 on the N64 Classic and Virtual Console, because you can play two-player out of the box on both, assuming the N64 Classic comes with an extra controller. It works both ways. What do you guys think of all this? Do you guys think it's necessary for there to need to be a virtual console? What games would you be looking forward to there being to being on the virtual console? Would you play A Link to the Past for the time, or are you fine the way it is? Leave thoughts and all that down below. Like to have a discussion going, and I'll see you.